You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where we will show you how to reclaim, reconnect, and refocus your life by bringing you the top real estate professionals in the industry. We'll pull back the curtain so you can implement these tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Well, we are back on the mic with episode 27 of the Reinvest Podcast. Seth and I get to show you guys how to maximize your life through the power of real estate investing. Seth, what are you listening to? What are you reading right now that's sharpening the saw?
Listening to my daily dose. Well, it's more like a bi-weekly dose of Bigger Pockets podcast. So kind of jumping in and out of some of those episodes and kind of seeing some of the market stuff that they're pointing out, but also reading a book called Traction by Gino Winkman, and so that's about the EOS kind of entrepreneur operating system and how to kind of organize and systematize your business. So been trying to absorb that. So we've been working through the steps, and that's been going pretty well.
Yeah, no, it has been good. There's a couple books I want to recycle through. Crushing It, that's a book I want to go back through. I'm trying to think. Invest Like a Billionaire podcast. I've really liked their podcast here lately. So, and of course, the Reinvest podcast is great. You should listen to it. So.
I've heard of it.
Today, we're joined by a prolific real estate investor who actually was a former Lima, Ohio native, Ben Leybovich. Ben, how you doing today?
Guys, pleasure to be with you.
We're excited for this, man. So it's not every day we get to meet somebody who's, on to bigger and better things, but was from our backyard.
So what did you do when you were in Lima?
So when I was in college, a long time ago, I'm a violin player by trade. And I was at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory, a really good school, like at that point, top 5 conservatory in the country. And I discovered I had a medical condition that made it unreasonable to pursue, standard music, like get an orchestra job and you sit on stage and you play. So I was just kind of trying to figure things out. And I was gigging in the Lima Symphony. Wow. For many, many, many years. A lot of us from Cincinnati were coming down. Later, they started bringing folks from Bowling Green, but in my days, a lot of us were coming down from Cincinnati and playing. And I met somebody on one of the trips that said, hey, well, we're trying to start a school for kids, a nonprofit, and we think we have a little bit of funding. We just need somebody to do the paperwork, 501c3. We need somebody who can kind of put many hats on, somebody who can play, somebody who can teach, somebody who can actually do some of that admin stuff. And I thought it was interesting. Long story short, I came down to Lima to start a music school.
Wow. And
it was called Music Factory, and we ran it for about a decade until we left to go to Phoenix. Wow. At which point we wound it down.
Wow.
But in 2006, I started buying real estate in Lima.
So your real estate company is Whitehaven Capital, and so since then, you mentioned that you guys are based out of Phoenix now. So your Lima stuff's probably a little bit different than your Phoenix stuff.
Yeah. Well, so what predicated the move? So I was buying things. And Whitehaven is a strictly Phoenix thing. It's a partnership with myself, and I have a partner in it. And I had nothing to do with Lima. I wasn't buying under that name in Lima. But I've been buying, and by the time my twins were about 4, 5, it was starting to be like nightmarish to take them to Dayton and Columbus for the activities, because Lima is a wonderful place, but it's this big, there's just like nothing there. So So like, Kumon for math, for instance, like you have to go to either Toledo or Denver or something, because that's what you have to do.
Right.
And so it just kind of became a thing of, we got to do something, because this isn't sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I kind of reached a plateau. I reached a point where I had passed off the music school directorship responsibilities to my wife, who was also is a fiddle player. We met at the conservatory. So she was basically running that for the last, 5 years. And I was focusing on real estate. But I got to a point where if I bought another fourplex, I would have shot myself. Just because, in terms of intellectual worth, like, that cup was completely overfilled. Like,
Right.
it was just, I didn't see myself in suspenders with 300 units doing that gig. And I knew the guys who did that gig.
Right,
and
right.
It's just, that wasn't the gig for me, right? I wanted to be more institutional. And I wanted to grow, and that meant I needed to pool capital from investors. There was no chance I was going to pool capital into Lima. There was no chance I could even wrap my head on pulling capital into Ohio or Indiana. And I looked very seriously at both of those because I have family in Columbus, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to, if I could, stay closer. I think if you do this business, you've got to be in a growth market where the employers want to be, the employees are coming, where the vibrant, diversified GDP, that kind of thing. I think, because we all make mistakes, and what's going to save you is if you're in a really good place that's growing and is likely to continue to be growing, right? So we took a year off and we traveled and we went to the Research Triangle in the Carolinas. We went to Texas. We went to Florida. We went to Georgia, Atlanta area. And, for me, Phoenix, I just loved it. Every time I went, I got to a point where for a couple of years, I was going twice a year. And I just, there's nothing like it. It's just a different kind of place. Some people, it's a little polarizing for some people, but I loved it. And I saw a very long runway relative to growth. And so I decided to move to Phoenix in 2016.
Wow.
And then the rest is history.
So you were in Lima up until 2016?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. For some reason in my mind, I thought you'd been gone longer than that. But you'd been investing in Arizona as soon as...
Nope.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started investing in Arizona. We formed the company in 17. We started buying in 18.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So that kind of catches up on your entry point into real estate. Your first real estate acquisitions were in Lima, or did you have stuff
Correct.
prior to that?
No, in Lima.
Okay. So then talk about the formation of the company. Who were some of those first partners that you brought in as capital partners to launch Whitehaven? And what were some of those acquisitions that started out?
So my partner, my business partner in Whitehaven, I was putting a deal together. It was an off-market deal. It fell apart, but he was going to invest in that deal. And that's how we hooked up. Actually, we hooked up through Brandon Turner. It's a story Sam tells better than me because I wasn't there for it. But apparently, Sam was listening to one of Brandon's webinars. Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner.
Never heard of him. I'm just kidding.
It's kind of before your guys' time. Like, I've known Brandon for God knows how long. But he has been off the podcast for, I don't know, 2 years now, if not more, 3 years. So like if you're a new Bigger Pockets podcast listener, you might not even know who Brandon Turner is, but he started basically the podcast for Josh. I didn't know Josh as well. I knew very well. But basically when he joined Bigger Pockets, he kind of made the blog what it became and made the podcast, created the podcast and all that. Very creative guy. Very nice guy too. I told him everything he knows, but don't tell him that. Don't tell him that.
We'll keep that secret.
But he knows.
You and I.
Yeah. So Sam was listening to one of his webinars, and Brandon apparently mentioned he's investing in a deal in Phoenix. Well, it was my deal he was going to be investing in. Sorry about that. It's early here. Dude, you woke me up. I mean, what the? I mean, if you weren't from Lima, I'd be like, get out of here.
I know. We got to use every card we can get.
What do you mean? Oh, man, I still got so many people in Lima. I'm on the phone texting and calling and talking to people still. Lima was good to me. Lima is I wish it was bigger. I wish it grew.
I know.
You know what I'm saying. But Lima was good for me. Like, people are nice. People are good. Anyhow, Sam contacted Brandon because Sam is a CPA. He started out at Deloitte. And then by this time frame, he is working pretty high up in accounting for a Premcor, which is one of like a big tech companies. At that point, I think maybe 3 billion. Now, I don't know, $5-10 billion companies, multinational companies in Phoenix. They're based in Phoenix. So he's working there and he's trying to phase himself out. And he's flipping houses on the side here and there and investing money into syndications, into people syndications. But he's a super smart guy. He's like, I got to be on this side. I don't want to be on that side.
Right.
I got to be on this side. So he's looking for an entry point on the sponsor side. And so he's contacting Brandon going like, what deal are you talking about when you mentioned that you're investing? So my buddy Ben, so he put us together and Sam and I had lunch and he was going to invest in this. And then the deal fell apart, but Sam and I hit it off. And, it's a good partnership in terms of our skill sets are completely separate. Clearly I'm a musician, he's a CPA. You can put two and two together, right? So it works. It works because we are so different in so many ways. But that's how that started. Now, in terms of equity, bringing equity to my first deals, I'm trying to figure out the year.
You probably just pulled out all your mattress money
right
and
around
threw it in your deal.
So right around 2012. Speaking about people in Lima, there's a company in Lima called Now Marketing. Jessica Phillips runs it. If you guys know her. Yeah. Okay. So when I was around, when she first started the company, and I had this idea that by 2013, that I'm a guy with a medical condition who can't rely on traditional employment because it's not wise. So I have to figure out a different solution. I start buying real estate. I mean, at some point I had a little vending thing. I was always looking for an angle. Mm-hmm. Okay. Vending machine thing that didn't work out, burned through very quickly. But the real estate thing stuck, right? And it was working. And I did it starting with nothing. I'm a musician, right? I didn't have any money. So I was very creative and I figured out a way zero down, like, it's real. You can do it, right? And I said, well, I can't be the only guy in a tough spot, such as what I found myself in. So I think I'm going to write a book or create a course or whatever. It was a number of iterations before it became the final product. And the final product was Cash Flow Freedom University is what I called it. Oh, wow. And it was a course that I recorded in my house at night in the basement at that point I lived on George Bingham Drive, which was in Elida. I don't know if you know where that is.
It's Country Air Estates right there.
Country Air Estates. I knew the developers. got really close with some of the builder team. That was a contributing thing. Just seeing what they do, how they do it. Good people. But then I found out Jessica and had her set up the website, kind of, the whole thing, right? So then I became rather prolific on Bigger Pockets. By about 2013, 14, became prolific on Bigger Pockets. And that's where I started to draw a lot of traffic to my website. In fact, and this is a long time ago, but when, what's his name? The CEO, the current CEO. When he first came, he said at one point, my website was the biggest recipient of traffic.
Wow.
From Bigger Pockets, from any website, anybody's website. Anyhow, I was spending a lot of time on BP at that point, and it's been dead for a long time. Like, I've not sold a course for years, but at that point, a lot of people were buying the course. I mean, it was $200, $300. I mean, I didn't want to. There was nothing usury about it. The way I saw it is, I'm not telling people anything new. I'm not telling anybody anything you can't discover in a library. But I am putting it together in a well-organized, actionable fashion.
Right.
And it's a real-time kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it so you can do it. Here's the challenges. Here's how you overcome it. So I didn't want to make it too expensive and guru-y, but I thought it was worth a couple of $100, and you have access to me and what have you. And it worked out really well. Those people eventually became my first investors.
Wow.
Many of those people eventually became my first investors for a number of different reasons. Number one, let's try what Ben is saying. Shit, it's too hard. Here's the money, Ben.
Right.
Classic.
Right? Or number two, I got 15 houses and fucking oops. We're gonna cut that section out, okay? We're gonna, because I got rep to protect now. My marketing department wants me to be like,
get your top button collar.
It's the old Ben is out, the new Ben is in.
Unfortunately,
we're gonna cut
live episodes. So.
No,
just kidding.
No.
So we had 15 houses.
So a lot of people say, "Oh, Ben, your stuff really works," but I don't want any more houses to manage. Like, my career is taking off. I'm building my stuff.
Right.
A lot of those people were like, ended up being like attorneys and CPAs that discovered their highest and best use of time and talents was probably not buying and managing fourplexes. So it worked out, and it sprouted many different kind of tentacles, and that was what started it. And of course, Bigger Pockets was huge. I mean, notoriety on Bigger Pockets was not a bad thing. So that goes to the question of, where did the first equity come from?
That's crazy that just even looking at Bigger Pockets and Brandon Turner. I mean, here's the thing. Everybody that benefited from Bigger Pockets had massive contribution to it. So it's not like people just came in and kind of sucked off of this thing. It was like a parasite to it. Brandon, the creativity, the vision. I mean, to do that is a huge expense of energy in all facets. Your contribution, you were contributing before it benefited you, but I think there's some really cool keys there, and anybody who's successful understands the principle that, you have to give. And when you give, you probably had some vision that, hey, this might benefit at some point in my career, but the entry point wasn't, how do I get from it? How do I serve? How do I give? How do I pour into this? How do I build? How do I sell a $200 course, which was probably undervalued at the time, to get people started? And then, boom, the long game is, hey, I'd like to invest with you. And we think so small. And I think probably because, we've been conditioned, our society thinks very transactional. How many people have more than $500 in their checking account? Not many, because they live in the here and the now. So you saw it and you had the vision to invest in something, even if you didn't know what the outcome was going to be yet. And that sprung into it.
I agree. I completely agree. But I also want to make an asterisk. It's hard when you're starting out, because by the time I was able to think outside of myself, I had a few of my needs taken care of. So by then, I already had a portfolio in Lima. I already had some cash flow, not a lot, but I had some. So I felt a little bit of freedom and ability to kind of pivot and maneuver. So when you get a little bit of comfort that way, then it's easier to allow your mindset to go outside of your primary needs. Right. But when you're talking to an audience of guys and girls who are just starting out, it's hard to convince people, and I don't know if it's possible to convince people that, hey, you got to think out there in order to receive it back in here. It's a nicely sounding concept, but it's just very difficult to translate into reality when people have real needs they're trying to remedy, right? But you are right. So I do my best thinking in the shower. Okay. I always have. I mean, I've written it in books and articles and everything, so I got nothing to hide. So I do my best. So at one point I'm taking a shower and I'm thinking about stuff, and I realize that the entrepreneur life cycle is you have a problem, you discover a solution, you imagine there's other people like you looking for a similar solution to a similar problem. You put the solution out there, 9 people take it for free, 1 person gives you money.
Wow. That's
an entrepreneur cycle. Okay. And you go from problem and solution to problem and solution to problem and solution. Right. So today, my problem and solution that I'm addressing to the outside world is very different from the one I was addressing 20 years ago, but it's the same it's the same kind of thing. I'm solving somebody's problem.
You're like reading my notes here. I mean, literally the question is like, hey, speak about, the conflicting advice of go big or go home, and slow and steady wins the race. Like, there's so much conflicting advice out there. And I think the hype guys and the gurus are like, go big, get in. And they're talking about action, but massive action. And then I'm just like, dude, sometimes you just got to like start small. Like you said, meet the basic needs, kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, get the foundation strong, and then the exponential growth can really hit that bell curve. And then even from a tactical perspective, what were some of the strategic moves? You hit on that. I guess one question I have for you now is, let me step back. Since you guys are Lima boys, I am sure you're going to recognize the name I'm about to tell you. This name played an absolutely fabulous role in my life. Ted Spielis. Yeah.
The Spielis family in
the nursery.
Shawnee. So that's his son. His father taught me a lot about life, about investing, about God. We had many conversations, very close relationship. One of the interesting things that I think is very profound is the thing you used to say all the time. Stumbling blocks and stepping stones look a lot alike from a distance.
Wow.
And to the conversation of go big or go home, until you know the difference, you don't freaking know the difference.
Right.
You got to be in the trenches long enough to figure out how a stepping stone is different from a stumbling block.
That's good.
You don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And so that's where the argument go big falls apart for me. Until you know what a tenant is going to do when their alternator in their car breaks, what kind of financial decision they're going to make that follows it. Until you know that, until it's in your skin, you're not ready to go big. Because even if you're institutional, what people don't understand is real estate is about the numbers, but numbers don't come first. Right. Circumstances and dynamics come first, and then we figure the numbers out from that and boil it down to a set of numbers. But you got to know what those dynamics are before you can, figure out the numbers.
Yep.
And that's where spending time in the trenches and kind of internalizing the process and the dynamics is very, very important. And you got to do that before you go big. So to me, I can only speak to my experience. Success to me has been a hockey stick. You crawl on the bottom for a while. It's longer for some, not as long for others, but you crawl on the bottom, and then once you start figuring things out and you put puzzles together, the pieces, then it's a rocket ship to a certain extent.
Dude,
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
advice.
that's great advice, and it kind of falls in line with you just gotta start. And it doesn't even have to be big, but even through your first deal, through your second, third, fourth deal, you're going to start to learn those things so that you can take on some bigger bites and, really start shaking things up. And the trick that I think's out there was, I know we kind of pick on Grant Cardone sometimes because he's like 10x your life, he's like, just go big, don't worry about anything, but for some people that's just not the right way to go. And, we've seen a lot of people and heard a lot of scary stories of people that have tried that and really flopped or lost their own money or lost someone else's money. And it's just not a safe way to go. But
well, I think, too, that message may be applicable for some people. Like, let's say that you have the foundations in place. You've been in investing for a while, and you need a nudge to get out of your comfort zone. Like, maybe you're ready to take that jump. But you could, the untrained listener could take that and internalize it and get burnt really bad and not realize it.
Well, and I think what people need to understand is, when you're listening to Ben Leybovich, you're listening to a real estate investor. When you're listening to Grant Cardone, you're listening to a genius marketer. But he's got PhDs running his real estate. Okay? We're not talking about the same thing. You got to recognize that. So the 10X idea, yes, when your marketing business is throwing off millions of dollars, then you have to go big. Otherwise, you give them away in taxes. You have to go big, and then you hire the right guys. You put the place to help you go big. So the message is not wrong, but how you get to the point of going big,
right?
It's a process, and for him, it was getting good at sales. And that wasn't a quick thing. And I think he tells a story himself that he did it out of his car at one point. Grant. So I think people misunderstand.
Yeah, misapply that.
The hype,
Right.
Hey, one thing, because we have this opportunity with you, and you've done such a good job breaking this down for people who are starting, people who are in it, and just maybe feel a little stuck, like they're spinning their wheels. What routines do you have set in place right now that help you grow in the different facets of your business, your emotional health, your mindset? What's a day in the life of Ben Leybovich look like? Getting on a 7 a.m. podcast too early.
No, this is unique. I don't do too many of these, specifically not first thing in the morning. I have an office in Arcadia. I have a lean but very, very capable team of people working at that office. And, that's for the last, year, because we didn't start really hiring until about a year ago. But we hired everybody within a short stretch of like 3-4 months. And by the way, if you're looking to hire, I would highly recommend headhunters. Trying to find somebody on your own is impossible. Essentially, what you're doing is you're poaching. If you want good people, you have to poach them for somebody else. That's what I found out. Because we tried to find somebody on our own through these websites and stuff. It just doesn't work. But nowadays, a lot of the mechanical stuff, I'm very fortunate I don't do. So my function is really, I'm on the phone with brokers, lenders, owners, and I'm looking for the next deal, and underwriting the next deal. But up until a year ago, it was just Sam and I doing everything. So it was much busier than it is today.
Wow. What about just personal development stuff? What are some habits that you've got set in place to do that?
None.
Come on, man. There's got to be something.
Listen, I'm not a fan. I've never been like the book club. By the way, those are good books. Traction, that's a good book. But
all the other ones suck.
I am not. I don't know if I should be embarrassed about it, or I don't know if I could be smarter or better or whatever. I open CNBC first thing in the morning to see what's going on in the market, and then I focus on my business.
Yeah. I
have never needed a push. I have never needed like a mental. I've never had a mental block. Like here's the thing. I was born in Russia. I left Russia when I was 13. Ran, stripped of my passport and everything.
Wow.
And I lived in Austria. I lived in Italy. I've been to many places in Europe. There's no place like America. With all of her problems, there's no place like America. You sink or you swim.
Right.
So I understand that many people need that extra motivation or extra input or whatever, but I don't have time for that shit.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about what I'm hearing you say is to not get hyper-focused on all the other stuff when most people know what they need to do today, they're just not executing on that information.
Right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, we're going to move into our bigger pocket, or sorry, not our bigger pockets, our smaller pockets segment. So, Ben, what was one of your worst real estate deals, or maybe a deal that was going to flop, but you somehow managed to save it or something, and what did you learn from it for our listeners?
$10. This story comes from Lima.
No, I mean, right now the market is very difficult. And what Whitehaven does is we reposition properties. So we got renovate everything. And the thing is, if with what's going on now, with the rates going up and, us being early in the cycle in a couple of properties and not having enough units renovated and not having enough top line padded. But that's just a function of being very well capitalized. In a market like this, it's just how it is. If you have one of those mortgages with floaters, but I'll put it to you this way: I've had trouble at the very bottom of the pyramid of real estate deals, and I've had trouble at the very top. Which would you prefer to deal with?
Let's go to the bottom.
I'm saying the top.
I feel like most people start there, though.
Because at the top, though, you've got a strong foundation underneath you to kind of lean on.
It's much simpler than that. When you solve a problem at the top, you make much more money.
Right. It's kind of that play with thousands, you make thousands. Play with millions, you make millions.
Yeah. So, it's really that simple. like it's the same idea of why, in 2012, I decided to stop buying small time real estate.
Right. There was a
I
cap,
could do it
there was a
forever,
ceiling.
and I could have, 500 units and fourplexes sitting all over Allen County, and I could do that, but that's not where the money is.
Right.
So why? Right. So I've seen trouble and very high stress environment at the bottom, and I've seen it at the top, and I'd just rather solve problems at the top.
Very good. What is one practical takeaway or piece of advice for our listeners to implement into their real estate investing business? I mean, this has been chock full, but is there one kind of tried and true lesson that you want to impart to people?
There are people who say real estate is all about cash flow. And there are people who say real estate is all about appreciation. The fact is, real estate is about both. And you have to have both in order to succeed in real estate. And until you kind of figure out how and why, you don't see the big picture. So study and understand why real estate is about both equity and cash flow.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. In closing, what's been one of the greatest resources in your real estate investing career? My guess is it's not been a book.
When I first started, Bigger Pockets didn't exist.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But Bigger Pockets proved to be highly beneficial to me, but it boils down to relationships.
Wow.
So, I think you have to be transparent and you have to be honest with people about who you are. Don't try to put a show on.
Yep.
Ted introduced me to Rick. I was out at Union.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a lot of things in Lima, and people are going to laugh at you at first in terms of, before you know what you need to know, it's like you come in there and you,
right.
But some people will give you a break, and those are the people that are going to help you build the empire. But it's all about relationships, and it's all about allowing people to see who you are, even if some of it is not
polished or
necessarily polished or even pleasant.
Right. I like that, man, because there's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. Well, I think there's a lot of people that you look at them and you kind of have this, like, all you see is just from the outside looking in. So you build a narrative in your mind of who they are. And, getting guys on like yourself today, they get to hear that it's so ironic that you started in Lima, Ohio, because it is such a different demographic, a different economy, a different area, and now you're in Phoenix. So just the symbolism there of starting small, grassroots, doing all the stuff on the fourplex yourself, and then growing into something bigger, that it's possible for people to do that. And, you just got to be true to that all the way through. Real quick, how can people follow Whitehaven Success? What does it look like for people maybe to hear some of the resources you put out there? I know you've got articles out there on Bigger Pockets. You haven't published any recently. Do you have anything going on for people to follow?
No. People just show up to the website, whitehaven.com. Okay. And you get hold of me by emailing through the website. I have a Facebook account, and I'll post things here and there on the renovations that we're doing or this or that. But I have kind of very much distanced myself from, most of social media and most of that. And there were a couple of different reasons for that, but mostly I just have to focus.
Yep.
I have to, at this point, speaking to institutional folks and things. And so I can't, I find it difficult being both people. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I just have to choose which person I want to be. And right now I'm this guy.
Well, dude, so thankful for your time today and you just sharing, a lifelong litany of lessons in real estate investing for our audience.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Love the fact that you guys are in Lima. Love the fact that we can name drop and all of us know who some of these folks are. Lima was a formative period in a couple of different ways for me, and will always be important to me. It just wasn't a place I could grow as an entrepreneur, as a real estate investor. But it'll always have a place in my heart.
Awesome, man. Well, glad to have you. Thank you. As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If this episode added to your tool belt or left you feeling inspired, go ahead and share it with a friend. Stay tuned on the first and third Tuesday of every month for new episodes. And if you want to get in touch with us, go to our LinkedIn or Facebook profiles and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper. See you next time.